seated, for instance, or you're standing, and when you breathe, if you're not getting air to expand in all the available directions of the rib cage, you're only going to be able to move towards the area of expansion. For a lot of people who are trying to jam themselves posturally into these shoulders back, weight in my toes, chest puffed out, the only way that I can expand is going to be forward and up, which is actually going to keep perpetuating my falling forward mechanism. That's going to keep everything tight along the backside, and it's this vicious cycle where people just lack the awareness to know that there's another way to do it.
Welcome to Reconsider. I'm Bill Hartman. This is the podcast to challenge you to ask better questions, to look beyond traditional models of thinking and arrive at better health and fitness solutions.
Reconsider posture and movement behaviors. Yeah. But that's a really good one, because that's something I fight constantly with clients too. Is this like, well, yeah, I've really been trying to work on my posture, because they come to me and their neck and their back hurts.
What is the correct answer to that? Like when somebody says, well, I'm trying to use good posture. Was it the one that your mom said?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I got news for you. No, I got news for you. I'm sure you had an outstanding mother. My mom is an outstanding human being. To this day, she remains the icon of all mothers, right? She is it. Like she is like, as far as, she doesn't curse, she doesn't drink, she never smoked. She is the nicest.
She's still working. She's very industrious.
She's still working. She's 89 years old. She's still working.
Unbelievable.
She's hard to track down because she's too busy. I can't talk to you right now. I'm too busy. Oh, okay.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. She doesn't know what good posture is. She knows what she thinks is pretty, right? But
yeah.
But here's the mistake. There is not one. Posture is determined by context and structure, and what is best under one circumstance is not best under the other. Trying to chase one is the problem. People come to us with limited options, and therefore that becomes the issue. That's why you get load on structure. That's why you get funky tensions that you don't like. That's why you can't sleep on your right side anymore, because your right hip hurts or your right shoulder hurts, is because you have a limitation in options. So you don't chase the one. There's not one optimal for anything, right?
Well, because that's a static representation. If there's a snapshot in time.
Hang on. Let's not knock static representations, because we do have to use static representations to teach people end positions of movements that they need to acquire to expand the range of options. So there's nothing wrong with static. The thing that's wrong is that there's one, like there's like the the grand poobah of postures. Oh, if you can just attain this, everything will be fine. It's like, and there's exercise systems and strategies and stuff that we could name out loud that are chasing that, and it's absolutely wrong. It gives the wrong concept, like, for people to move toward. It is the wrong. What's the word I'm looking for? This is
model.
No, it's the age-related decline thing that's catching up.
What is happening?
Yeah, I have Alzheimer's.
Well, it's cool because you can hem and haw all you want, and I'll just edit it to make it seem like you just snapped right to it.
No,
when in reality, people have no idea if my editing skills aren't just so fantastic that there aren't moments where you're just sitting there staring at the screen. It's like we've lost Bill again. He's faded out.
It's like, this is the blooper reel, right?
Sometimes people they don't even know that you might just get up and walk around every once in a while. I'm like, Bill, where'd you go, Bill?
No, it's just it's unfortunate because and I don't know, maybe we can blame mothers from the 50s or something like that, or charm
Well,
school,
I think
where they had to walk around with the book on their head.
Yeah, I was just about to bring up those aesthetic schools and those charm schools and things like that.
Because again, it's like okay, they were not worried about discomfort, right?
Well, beauty and pain were the things that were supposed to be together.
High heels, and a corset. Let's just throw those into the mix, right? Okay, yeah, probably set some standards that are probably unnecessary or ineffective. But some of that stuff is probably the foundation for why this whole posturing thing exists, right?
Yeah.
When the reality is, it's the dynamic. We are movers. We are not meant to be entirely static. We need to acquire positions. Again, like when we talk about static stuff, we're chasing an end position, so you know where you can go. Right? You have to establish that first, then you can move through an excursion to get there. That's why a lot of the initial programming that you'll see is static in nature, because these people need to acquire these positions so they have a place to go. We're actually creating a space that you can move into that you could not move into before. You have to access that.
Through that path of motion, you can choose any moment through that path and have a static excursion or a static, repetition. So
right.
The middle of the squat, top of the squat, bottom of the squat. You can pause at any moment and try to change the shape in that position.
Right. What people try to do, unfortunately, is they try to move through the full excursion first.
Yeah.
Big mistake. You have to capture the end position first. The one thing, my least favorite book of all time is 7 Habits of Highly Effective
Habits.
Yes. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Worst book ever written.
I thought we were going to talk about specific books and people.
I don't know. It's like, okay.
This is actually one of the,
this is
one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about on this podcast. But I don't want to get too into it because I enjoy that book and I think it's useful for people to use some of it as
I think the first chapter was useful.
Okay.
After that,
what is your
after that I could just throw it out in the street and I get the same result. The most important thing in that book, there's a single statement in that book that solves the problem. And that is begin with the end in mind.
That's chapter 2.
It's got to be the beginning of it then, because, like I said,
well, let's talk about the 7 habits. Be proactive. So these are actually good mental models to use. And I having read the book, and I actually disagree with you about this. But I know other people that said this book sucks. I don't agree. I think that at least if you were just to look at the summary of the book and just understand a quick summary of it, I think it would be very useful. Be proactive. Begin with the end in mind. Put first things first. So that's your 1 questions. What are the 1 things? Think win-win. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Synergize and sharpen the saw, or in continuous progress for yourself. I don't see any issue. So
there's nothing. I don't know. I just literally. It's the sleepiest book I think I've ever read.
Yeah, but you're also the type of guy.
And don't try to listen to the audiobook.
I think I did. Well, I would suggest anyone go and just read a summary of the book. Let's say that. Come up with, if we're trying to get people to ask the right questions to think for themselves.
With some of the nonfiction websites that give the short versions.
Yeah, I could, like HubSpot. You mean? I'm looking at the HubSpot right now.
Blinkist is probably another one. Hey, Blinkist, come talk to us.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the 7 habits, but I do believe that in terms of mental models, they can be very useful. And I would say
I just didn't like
you were bored. You were bored by the book, which I can get. It's funny that I wasn't planning on talking about the posture and movement behavior stuff today, but I just said it and it really struck a nerve with you, and you went into like a 2-minute diatribe about it.
Well, but hang on. It's one of those things that if people could understand that quickly,
yeah, that's why we're talking about it.
It would solve so many problems.
Yeah.
Because the concept of chasing the one is almost always the mistake.
Sure. And that's, that one of those, that's a kind of a good mental model to think of too. Like, what are the lowest hanging fruits? What are the things that if people understood well would take care of a lot of other things? Like, what would have the greatest trickling down effect for a lot of people? And I think when it comes to a lot of health issues and wellness issues, I often end up asking potential clients and future clients about their sleep, because if you don't have good sleep and you're not getting good sleep, it literally changes everything.
Yeah,
and that's like a really, really good example of.
There's a chapter on sleep and all gain no pain.
Yeah, in the book.
The book.
Should we call it the book?
No.
Well, I think that's how I'll refer to. We're referring to Bill's book, All Gain No Pain, and now there will be an image of that book on the screen again. I'm going to put as many opportunities to put you shirtless on this podcast as possible. Just Bill's 50-year-old ripped body.
50-year-old, yeah. That was it was years ago. Years ago.
How many Batman movies ago was that?
Gosh. 6 years. It's got to be at least two.
Yeah. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity for anyone that's listening that hasn't clicked off after the first 30 seconds, where half of the people click off the video. I'm going to keep editing to try to fix that problem. But if you can think of, if you're listening to this and you're watching us on YouTube, which I suggest for even if you are an audio podcast person, give the YouTube video a shot, because there's some funny clips in it. And it's cool to see us sort of talking to each other, I think. But circling back to that whole idea of what are the big rocks in terms of things that if people understood would help them immensely. If you have a good idea of that, or like an example of that, leave it in the comments and we can have a little bit of a discussion there.
Okay. So let me make reference to a conversation I had recently.
Sure.
With one of my kids that's working in the pros. And so he's very, very much in charge of many aspects of the culture upon which all of their processes are based. Okay. And what people don't do is they don't establish a personal culture that an active lifestyle can be superimposed upon. Mm-hmm. Like they think that, I just need to go out and I need to do any kind of exercise, or I need to do this kind of exercise because this influencer says do this, right? When that person, if they had followed that guy long enough, they would probably recognize the fact that, he said something that was in conflict with that, like last month, because he just needs content.
Yeah.
Right? No, you need to create this personal culture, and so this is a foundation. It was like, well, okay, if you exercise, do you have the capacity to recover from exercise? Right? So the recovery element of it has to be part of the foundation, which you mentioned sleep. So now we have to mention fluid replacement. We have to mention nutrition, etc. These are all foundational concepts that if you don't have them in place, guess what? None of the other stuff works nearly as well as it could. You might get some benefit of it, but if you put all the bricks in place, you now have a foundation upon which to build. You do this progressively. Of course, you don't try to throw all of this, on the table at one time, but these behaviors do need to become an established part of just your natural, normal behavior, right? Because if they don't, then everything else suffers.
Right, and let's use that as a segue. We're going to get into the big rocks for posture, and we'll call it just like movement behaviors in general, But going back to the format of the podcast, which I'll remind you of again, as talking about the history of things, like what people currently believe, and then what we're asking them to reconsider. I think we already touched on the history a bit. It's coming from the beauty pageant, the charm school type of aesthetics of. Etiquette school, having the book on your head, shoulders back, chest out, sucking your belly in, being up on your toes, and then all of these things have implications on center of gravity and just gravity management in general, and will actually change anytime you have muscle contraction, you will actually change the shape of the container.
Right. So you're using an intentional strategy to achieve an outcome that you think is desirable without considering the negative secondary consequences of such. And so this goes with the exercises that you're already doing that may seem productive because everybody's doing them, right? Or again, you chose a strategy that presents an aesthetic, but from a behavioral standpoint, like I said, the secondary consequences are actually quite negative.
Sure. Yeah, and it's just really important for people to understand that even if there were specific things about posture that everyone needed to do, there's such a level and a layer of there's such an idiosyncratic nature to all of this stuff. So every individual person is going to have to be in certain positions because they can only access certain positions.
Correct.
And amongst an entire group of people, that might vary slightly. So we call that attractor states versus fluctuator states.
Right. Right.
So what
That's
are the things?
Yeah,
and that's a little too sciencey. But we'll make it a little simpler in terms of what are the things that are always, what are the principles that are always going to be true of shape change and postural positioning and movement, and then what are the questions and the things that we can use to help sort of adjust, and what are the things that fluctuate from person to person and make it more individualized.
Well, the concept of segments of your body that can move in opposition to one another, rather than having segments that always move together. So, the ability to turn your head on your neck versus everybody's had a stiff neck at some point in time. They know what I'm talking about when everything has to turn together. It's it's okay. Here we go. 1989, Michael Keaton, Batman turn.
Yeah.
Got the cowl on. Can't turn your head. Can't turn your neck. So that would be.
Yeah, I can't wait to put a video of this in this podcast. I know exactly the turn, just like that.
That would be an orientation. So these are multiple segments that are moving together. Okay. The goal to be able to access the greatest number of movement options is to have what's called relative motion. And so this is the ability to move segments in opposition of one another, right? Over time, static behaviors, trying to chase a posture where you have the lock segments together is going to promote a reduction in relative motion. Your ability to breathe effectively without compensation. So this is no forced inhalation, no forced exhalation. And people don't recognize when they're doing this. So that's a big part of the problem is they get stuck into these behaviors that produce a reduction in the relative motion between segments that need to turn in opposite directions at the same time. And that actually restricts your breathing. And so some people are on the end of forced inhales and some people are on the end of forced exhales, right? And again, they don't recognize it because they get used to it. It becomes their natural behavior. But reestablishing what is considered normal tidal volume is actually a big chunk of the solution of reestablishing relative motions because that's where relative motions live. And so the way that you breathe is an incredibly strong influence. So again, talk about foundational. You can go back into Goldthwait, 1922. So he was a doc in 1922. Basically, and again, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact statement, but it's basically breathing is movement, movement is breathing. We knew this 100 years ago, at least, if not more. Probably more so because AT still was pre-1900. Okay.
Well, we're saying a lot of different things, and for someone that doesn't really understand what movement is, it can seem very complex and complicated, but you really only have two strategies in which to move.
Yes, because but again, so people see typically levers and pulleys as movement. It's actually a useful model up to a point, but this is based on dead guy anatomy. So we take a cadaver, we see how the cadaver behaves, and then we say, well, this is obviously how humans behave, and that's not how we do it, because we are a fluid-based being. We're a big bag of water and air. Those are both fluids, by the way. And so they behave as such. And so the way that we move is actually by changing the physical shape of things. So when I bend my elbow, you could say, well, it's a lever and pulley, but it's missing some of the things that are actually required to have a lever and pulley model. It appears that way visually, but the reality is that that is a fluid-based shape change. That's how we do stuff. And so we have to squeeze fluid out of areas, and we have to let certain areas expand, and that's how we turn, bend, squat, all of that stuff. So these are shape changes. And if you can't change shape, so just think about like a normal breath in, which would you feel yourself get bigger, or you take up more space, and then you feel the exhale, and you take up less space. And now take that concept and apply it everywhere, because your entire system changes shape every time you breathe. Your entire system has to move every time you breathe. Is it movement a lot of movement? Not necessarily. But the area that's changing shape the most is what you can see. And so the more broad your emotions need to be, the greater the capacity for shape change. But the foundation of that is your ability to take air in and out without comfort.
And when it's important for people to understand that your greatest potential for movement in any of the available directions as a human is going to be dictated upon your ability to expand into that direction.
Yes.
So that's what if you're seated, for instance, or you're standing, and when you breathe, if you're not getting air to expand in all the available directions of the rib cage, you're only going to be able to move towards the area of expansion. For a lot of people who are trying to jam themselves posturally into these shoulders back, weight in my toes, chest puffed out, the only way that I can expand is going to be forward and up, which is actually going to keep perpetuating my falling forward mechanism. That's going to keep everything tight along the backside, and it's a vicious cycle where people just lack the awareness to know that there's another way to do it.
Right. And then eventually you're going to reach the capacity of the system, and then you have no more movement available.
Yeah, it's not a problem until it's a problem.
Right. Well, okay. So here's the threshold. And this goes for anything, whether it's sensory awareness or anything like that. So this would be the point where you would start to recognize that something is going wrong. And then you have this accumulated change, right, before it even reaches your awareness. And then there's the one incident that might take you over that. And you go, I never had this problem before. Yes, you did. It was just below the level of awareness based on your behavior.
Yeah, you finally fell over the cliff. Like you've been edging
towards
the
cliff. The cliff until you fall off the cliff, right?
Yeah, and then once you're there, like if you keep going forward as you're falling down the cliff, that's not going to help you. If you just keep doing the same things, you got to do something different if you want to have a different result. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's not get too. I don't want to get too. There's a lot we could just really dive into and completely go tangentially away from, but trying to come back to the posture thing, we've already briefly touched on the history of it. I think the beauty schools, the charm schools, even fashion, I think has been a big dictator of postural changes over time. And then as soon as people can make money off of posture, they'll try to make commercial models and devices and all these sort of ergonomic chairs. And the whole idea of just ergonomics drives me insane sometimes, because you're just forcing people into doing the exact opposite of what we're talking about.
Exactly. So they're perpetuating the concept of the ideal. They're saying this chair is better because we're going to stick you in the position that is best. It's like, no.
Right. Here's a good mental model for people. You will often experience failure when you try to jam a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, let's go the opposite direction from the ergonomic chairs to the stand-up desk.
Yeah.
Same problem.
Yeah, it's just because you are, if you have an issue, if you have some type of injury and chronic injury, and there's association between you standing up or you sitting down for long periods of time, the reason why there is a problem is because of how you are doing the thing that you're talking about. So it's if you go to somebody because your low back hurts when you stand at your desk for 2 hours, me treating your low back or doing something to your low back and giving you relief is not fixing the problem whatsoever. It's get as close to the thing that causes the issue as you can safely, and then fix it. It's like if you have someone, if you're a trainer or a therapist and someone comes to you with a running related injury, I don't know how many times I've talked to other therapists or coaches and been like, have you watched them run? And the answer 90% of the time is no. It's like, well, how are you going to help them with their running injury by doing glute bridges and goblet squats?
Okay. That's going to require some specialized knowledge that a lot of people don't have. So they're the wrong person, potentially.
That's true. That's great. That's a great point. So say I have a good amount of experience with golf, but if I had a golfer come to me and then I tried to look at his golf swing, I wouldn't know what I'm looking at if I'm a normal trainer. So always if someone has a golf swing related pain issue and then I'm trying to correct it by using the hammer and tools that I have, I'm going to miss the boat a lot of times. The question should always be, what's the thing? When does it hurt the most? Like, what activity? Can we look at that specific activity? Do I have a certain degree of expertise in how that activity is supposed to happen? And if I don't, I need to give you to somebody that can.
Right.
But even that line of thinking isn't what's common. It's people just trying to fix a separate problem with the tools that they currently have, thinking that the hammer and screwdriver that I have will work for everything.
Right, which is why, when you have something that is outside your scope, outside your capacity, not within your skill set, it would behoove you to help them find something.
And I think that mental model has a specific name. I think it's called the circle of competence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's if you have to know, you first have to have the awareness to know what is in your circle of competence, and then the people in your network that you know are outside of your circle, and you rely on them. So it actually expands the reach that you have.
Right. It doesn't mean that you can't improve that concept. It's like this is where you gain experience and you add tools. Right.
You have such an ability to improve yourself by doing so. And it's another thing we've talked about before is have the outcome be more important than your ego.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Yes.
As long as something works, it shouldn't matter if you're always going to be wrong. Everyone is wrong. All models are wrong.
Thank you.
You're trying to help. Thank you, George Box.
We haven't
referenced.
We haven't talked about George. We talk about mental models and such. So it's like
as an homage to George Box, I will try to find a good picture of him, and we'll put that. I will throw that quote up on the screen because I don't even know what the guy. I don't know what the guy looks like.
Oh, really? There is a picture of him.
Okay, I believe that.
And he usually has the quote with him. So yeah.
So we talked about the history of it a bit. We've talked about. I think the more common things that the way people see it is as a static representation and this stuck shape that's sort of locked in position that you need tension in order to do it. So you're tall, your shoulders are back, your chin is tucked, and your chest is out, squeezing.
Okay, here you go. Quick historical frame of reference. So we talked about we picked on the females mostly with the etiquette, the charm school concept. Okay, military postures.
Military posture
for the male.
It's so funny every time we have a topic and I get into the history of it, something to do with the military. Every time, like we're going to talk about walking and steps eventually. It's like, when did walking and for fitness become a big deal? When they instituted the 50-mile hike as a test for the military. Yeah. And then JFK got way into it. I don't want to get into that just yet because we'll have an episode about that.
Well, that's a nice preview, though. You should leave that in.
Well, yeah. So try to like, comment, and subscribe to the podcast.
Yes.
If there's also I want to make sure that people know that if they have questions they would like us and topics they'd like us to talk about that are commonly confusing to them, that they can either email us at askbillhartman@gmail.com, or better yet, Bill and I both check the comments regularly. So if you leave a comment on the YouTube video, we can have a couple of conversations running in those at the time. And then if you know anyone that could use, if you have a client or you have a father, mother, brother, sister who is always doing these things because they say they're the right thing to do and they're constantly on this hamster wheel of injury and going to chiropractors, please share this stuff with them because I think it'll be helpful. Well, the pop and snap folks of the world who give you instant relief, but that's another one of those things. Like I can, because we're talking about shape change and the ability to change shape. If something is in the way, I have a chiropractor that can be a great way to influence shape change. But the problem becomes what happens in between my visits to the chiropractor.
Right.
That's the real question.
And be useful. Doesn't mean it's always useful. Doesn't mean it's always applied effectively.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd say it's, applied effectively. Well, in my experience, the practitioners who applied effectively are also the people who are considering what's happening that's causing the issue to begin with.
But let's not pick on a profession, because again, we're actually talking about anything.
Yeah, it could be massage therapy, it could be physical therapy, it could be
people
stretching.
Say, oh, planks are good for you. No, they might be good for some people. In
context
situations. Yes.
Well, it's people stop. Okay, so one of the main goals of our podcast is for people to don't settle without asking more questions. Correct. Keep asking questions until you can't anymore. People say that planks are good. Okay, why are people saying that planks are good? And then if they say, well, it's because of this. Well, what about this thing is making the changes in these people? What about the person that did planks and their back still hurts? Why is that person the exception to the rule? Because if something is coherent and useful, there should be no exceptions. As you boil down to the first principles, when it comes to first principles thinking, there aren't exceptions, because then you're not dealing with first principles anymore.
Yeah, so now we're digging into Socratic.
The most bodacious philosopher in ancient Greece.
Why?
Socrates!
That's an excellent way to try to handle things like that. So we've sort of touched on everything so far. We've kind of talked about where it came from, what people's perspective is on it as this sort of static thing, and they're just adding tension to areas that are already tense. They're compressing areas that are already compressed. They're adding more compression to try to jam themselves into like this pole, straight up and down pole scenario. And then when that changes how they breathe and where they place their center of gravity. And those things actually end up perpetuating the underlying issue in a lot of cases. So the perspective that we're going to try to be able to offer everyone is finding these static positions that allow for that expansion to go in all directions. So is there a simple way to kind of break that down?
You mean to reestablish the ability to change?
Yeah. Give them a better starting position that allows for adaptability.
Right. But again, so what we're doing is we're setting them up in the end positions that they have access to. So we're always working in what we call an available space first. And then from that, because of the way we move into and out of those positions, we can actually expand the available space. That gives you more movement options. That gives you any number of postures that you may need depending on context.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to introduce the concept that's going to be the most useful for people to understand when it comes to posture. Like, posture is not a picture in time. Pictures in time can be useful, but it's how you move through, because it's like a four-dimensional representation, because as I move through time and space, things change.
That's correct.
Reconsider is sponsored by Substance Nutrition. Go to substancenutrition.com. Get your Neuro Coffee, better brain, and Synthesis, better protein, better body. Enter the coupon code RECON, RECON, and get free shipping on all of your orders.